Welcome back to that rugby podcast hosted by the Rugby Booth. Look, it's a weird week for me. As I put in the run sheet, it's a kissing your sister type feeling. Now, luckily, I don't have any sisters, so it doesn't feel that weird for me to be saying that. But I'm glad you're not having to say it. That's all I'm saying. But
Yeah,
a draw in rugby, a draw in sport always feels a bit weird. Obviously, there's that sport football that happens quite a bit, and everyone's like, "That's a bit weird." In rugby, it's even more rare, especially since we've
yeah,
introduced the old extra point. The Hurricanes played out a draw against the Force. Now, we sat here last week and discussed how did I feel going into this, and I rightfully said I was confident. I was confident, as I was, but this is a different Force team. And it kind of, the two explanations of what I gave, which was like this Hurricanes team's good enough, but this Force team's also good enough, kind of merged together. And we saw a 17-all draw, which, again, I think it was the first time since 2020 or 2021, something like that. Some
for a
calls
long time.
for the draw to be abolished as well, and that extra time should just continue. I'm in favour of just letting the game continue until we get a
Yeah,
winner, but I also understand TV commitments and timing slots and everything like that must be taken into consideration because we can't end up with a 180-minute game. Hughes, what was your
exactly right.
thoughts on the draw, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I think there are certain sports where um, a draw is not on the cards. Like NFL, American football, you just don't need to draw there. But I think for a lot of sports, a draw is perfectly fine. It's strange, yeah, but hey, it is. Sometimes two teams are just evenly matched, and that's what we saw here. The Force and the Hurricanes are equally matched. Um, so I think this is a tough place for the Hurricanes to play. For them to come away with more points than you would have got in a loss, I think is probably not the worst thing in the world. Perth is notoriously difficult. We still haven't had a New Zealand team win in Australia this year. So but you're the closest to it that anyone's gotten. So there's that positive as well. But yeah, Perth is notoriously difficult for anyone to play in, but especially in New Zealand. Like you're 6 hours different from your regular time zone. A heck of a travel, you know. Um, I think the Force will probably be a little disappointed they weren't able to get it done at home, especially when they had a chance to win it at the end and it was a missed penalty that um, decided it. But hey, it's positive for the Force as well in a way because they're competing with teams like the Hurricanes who are regularly close to the top of the Super Rugby ladder. Not this year, but in years gone by.
Yeah, and I would say again, it was as you said, a good sign of the game, and it's one of those ones where we may look back on, and both these teams, if they do say make the finals, it'll be because they've got that draw, those 3 points there, that are probably to their advantage. But yeah, it's tough watch. Ruben Love's kick off the goal, hit the goal post. His drop goal also hurt the soul a bit, but that's rugby sometimes. The bounce of the ball, we always say it. Look, mate, let's get on to which was a tough old weekend for you in Fiji,
Mm.
bud.
Look, it's similar to once I heard that they were going to be resting players for this week. I had a similar feeling to the Hurricanes game. What doesn't make sense to me is that why this week was a rest week when we have a bye. The next week. That doesn't make any sense to me. But look, what we saw here is hooker depth is hurting the Waratahs with Parecki and Vailanu down. Ethan Dobbin's doing a great job, but once Julian Heaven steps on the field, it is not heaven, it is hell. It was not good. I will say as well, the Fijian style of rugby seems to be very difficult for the Waratahs to handle. In that, it's a lot of very free flowing, very broken play. There are a few occasions where I'm looking at this, and as you know, I watch a bit of rugby league as well. Like in rugby league, that is a shepherd. There's a lot of running to and behind players, and there are certain points where I'm like, I know the law is a bit more relaxed in union than it is in league, but come on, that's clearly impinging or impeding the Waratahs defender's ability to make a play on that attacker. Like I didn't see anything too egregious from the referee. So like I'm not laying this at the referee's feet, if you know what I mean. I just think it's more of a law of the game type thing. And yeah, but for whatever reason, the Waratahs, we saw it early in the season where they played Fiji at home, really struggled to handle a lot of that real broken play, which Fiji love to play in. Uh, and then missing some of your key pieces like Bell and things like that as well is never going to be a great week. One thing I will say is I think this game though has vindicated Dan McKellar, and it has changed my opinion on who the starting fly half of the Waratahs should be. Lawson Crichton has been an excellent defender and has been a good game manager. I think I've been disappointed because Tane Edmund has had some of those real flashy moments, in his past, and we saw it a lot in North Harbour, and we were just like, he just needs some time in Waratahs colours again to bring that to Waratahs level. He's had a few games there, and he's been frankly disappointing, and he was bad this game. He was bad this game, and I think it is justified McKellar's decision to make Crichton the starting 10 for the Waratahs. And this is me changing my tune as well based on what I'm seeing in front of me. I am not one to pick a hill and die on it when new evidence comes forward. And that's what this has been. That's what these games have shown. I think you just sit there and I don't know what it is with Tennant, but you just feel like there's more there. We've seen more from him before. He's just not putting it out there for whatever reason. So I think McKellar has been justified in his decisions there. Andrew Kellaway as well did not have one of his better games, which for him is, I'm sure he'll be disappointed as well, particularly after the effort they put in against the Chiefs. And I think that probably took a lot out of them as well. So, a combination of things. As a Waratahs fan, how do I feel? Let's look at this Waratahs season with some clear eyes, right? Very good at home, all right? Undefeated at home so far, but can't travel terribly well, right? So why would you not take why would you not take the game against the bottom of the ladder team where you're playing in their territory? Why would you not pick this one as say, okay, we can win this one. Let's go out and give this everything and win this. Put your best team on the field for it, and then you're also going into a bye week. So that strategy frustrates me as a Waratahs fan. Now, I think that is dictated by Rugby Australia, not by the Waratahs, which is even more frustrating that it's the coach isn't able to pick the team that he wants. And I think someone online, I don't know if it was the reporter Christy Doran or if it was the Rugby Report Card, but someone said, what is resting Angus Bell on the 19th of April in a Super Rugby game going to do to affect the British and Irish Lions tour in June, July? Now, that's with the benefit of hindsight, and then we note that there was, Bell, and that's assuming Bell doesn't get injured in this game, But I think this load management, I don't know if load management is as a way to say it. I think you just, call a spade a spade. You don't want to risk injuring, the best prop in Australia, right? You don't want to risk injuring him, but don't call it load management because that's not going to affect his fatigue for British and Irish Lions series. So that to me is disappointing. When you look at the Waratahs season as a whole, what are our next games? By this week, going to Canberra to play the Brumbies. That is going to be a tough one. That's going to be, tougher than, playing in Fiji potentially. If you look at the ladder, it certainly seems that way. Hosting the Reds, then hosting the Crusaders. Two tough games, and very high possibility that you lose one or both of these games and lose your home undefeated streak. Then traveling to Perth and traveling to Auckland for the last two games, both extraordinarily difficult places to play, as we've said both this episode and in a previous podcast. I just look at this game and I think surely this is one where you really sort of mark it down on the calendar and okay, if we're going to win a game away from home this year, this is going to be the one. Probably, especially after how Fiji have started the year. I guess you might have also circled the Moana Pacifica game as well. Injuries in that, in the week before that sort of torpedoed that plan. But it's frustrating. It's not worrying. It's frustrating.
Yeah, you sound like a frustrated man. Friends, you talked about Creighton, you talked about Edmed. There was another Australian 10 that's put his name up in lights yet again.
Yes.
And you mentioned him a couple of weeks ago. I kind of poo-pooed the plan, but Mr. James O'Connor kicked home the winning penalty for the Crusaders against the Blues. Again, Crusaders this shows how good that Blues team still is, and the fact that if they can make the finals, they can beat anyone, because that was down in Christchurch. an Australian stood up for the Crusaders, which you don't often fucking hear.
No.
But what do you make of that? I mean, the calls are already there, and you'd already mentioned it about him potentially being a bolter for the British and Irish Lions. Plays like this again in a tough conditions, raining, heavy underfoot, nothing but straight down the middle from James O'Connor to win the game for the Crusaders. What does that get going for a kid, my friend?
That's the type of experience you need in a Wallabies squad to face the British and Irish Lions, right? And this is a highly experienced player that has been through a British and Irish Lions tour before, that has been through several World Cups, has been through the ups and downs of his fame and career. I'd love to see him in the squad. I mentioned it a couple of weeks back, as you said, and I think the idea is picking up steam, even if it's just for simply the fact of him having faced it before and having look. Almost certainly, Noah Lolesio is not going to be in the tour squad. I think everyone just sort of accepted that. You then look at the other tens that are around. There's not a huge amount of experience, right? Donaldson and Liner have both pulled on the 10 jersey before, but they've not ever made it theirs. It's not ever been like, okay, yeah, these guys can really run the game. Donaldson's had some moments, but it's not been nothing great. And Liner I don't even think it's had a full game's worth of experience in a Wallabies jersey before, right? Crichton, as we said, his stock has been rising since he's been named the Waratah starter. He's been getting better and better every week. James O'Connor himself thinks he would be a very good 10 for the Wallabies, probably because he learnt under James O'Connor at the Reds on how to manage a game and is stout defensively. So I think, but again, no Wallabies experience at all. And I don't know if you want your first Wallabies game to be against the British and Irish Lions. I think the coaches will take too much out of his hands for that. Maybe the bench 10. I would love to see it. I think he is, he's a bit older, but sort of who cares? You've got so much pace outside of him. He doesn't need to be the fastest player on the field. He's not getting injured every month like Quade Cooper was. Like he's got the talent that we're still seeing. The Crusaders are second on the ladder. He's pulling his weight. He's winning games for them. He's in a undoubtedly hostile atmosphere in New Zealand. I doubt there's many people down there who like him other than in Christchurch right now. And I'd say as well, probably your Hurricanes are probably liking him right now, considering they've kept the Blues off your back for another week, and allowed you to leap over them. Actually, I think so. I'd love to see it. I think it'd be great. I think it's exactly what the Wallabies need, is that steady hand on the tiller to unlock all of that outside talent. Suoli'i, Jorgensen, whoever they have in the centres, whether it be Ikitau, if Karevi comes back in the squad, Tom Wright, there's a bevy of talent there that's waiting for someone to steer him the right way. And James O'Connor, he's learning from the Crusaders as well, one of the most successful franchises in Super Rugby history, as we've said before. That he's not learning under Richie Mo'unga, sure, but he's learning from that system. He's learning from that organization. Really one of the true proper franchises of Super Rugby. We don't really have many sort of franchises that can spit out repeated success. I'd probably say the Crusaders and the Brumbies really are the two sort of most consistent teams that we've seen. As good as the Blues have been in the last few years, that I would say if you look at, you have to take an even longer term view of it than that. I think he's learned a lot, and I think he could be exactly what the Wallabies need.
And I guess so. You got him in the squad. What are your thoughts on starting him /23? He's doing that role at the moment for the Crusaders, which is off the bench, finishing games. What are your thoughts?
Well, let's as I said, like the other options for starting 10 are not hugely experienced in that role, unlike James O'Connor is. I would like, and he's not one that would get unnerved in that starting 10 role, whereas Donaldson, Liner, Crichton, all youngish, all inexperienced at the national stage. I would probably currently we're taking Noah Lolesio completely off the board at this point, because as I said, I think that's the default assumption. That's what he seems to be assuming as well, and it's what the media is all assuming. It sounds like that's the general vibe that's going on. So we're taking Noah Lolesio off the table as the Wallabies starting 10. Your options then, if we're looking around the other Super Rugby franchises, right, from in Australia, you've got Tom Liner for the Reds, you've got Ben Donaldson for the Force, and you've got Lawson Crichton for the Waratahs, right? I don't think Tane Edmed is sniffing a Wallabies jersey currently. You've got your other youngins like Harry McLaughlin-Phillips for the Reds, Deborah Sini for the Brumbies. I don't think they're there yet. I don't think either of them have a chance of being starting 10. So you look at those three: Lawson Crichton, Tom Liner, Ben Donaldson as potential other starting 10s. You weigh them up against James O'Connor as your starting 10, right? For that first kickoff of the British and Irish Lions, it's the first game in Wallabies colours, first game with a lot of these other players that they from different Super Rugby franchises, some from overseas that they've never played with before, right? Do you want one of those guys running out there, or do you want James O'Connor running out there, who has played with a lot of them? He's been around, right? He's been in that situation before. I would say James O'Connor. The other three, I think I would say Liner and Donaldson probably have the inside line at the moment, just simply because they've been in the Wallabies camp before, whereas Lawson Crichton hasn't. So you might see Liner come off the bench or Donaldson come off the bench, both because they're good kickers as well. And I think that's probably gives them the edge over Crichton, is that you need a kick to seal the end of the game. You can rely on one of those two probably better than you can Lawson Crichton. Week after week, James O'Connor is painting a gold jersey onto himself.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you. I'll be very interested in what Schmidt makes of it all. Again, I think, as you said, I think that playing for the Crusaders does help. Like, especially when they're winning Crusaders. Like, there's no doubt that we've had many great All Blacks come from Crusaders country for a reason, as much as I hate to admit it. But it does help, and as you said, I think it's probably made O'Connor a better player, and I think the opportunity's there, and I don't think Schmidt will mind the fact that, again, I tend to believe this should be the case for all Super Rugby teams, and I've said it before, that even New Zealand players should be eligible to still play for the All Blacks if they play for an Australian Super Rugby team. Like, it shouldn't matter who you play for, you should be eligible to be able to play. And I assume for the Wallabies, they're not going to count that as international either. But
I wouldn't assume so. He's in Super Rugby,
That's what you would assume, but
yeah.
New Zealand Rugby treat it one way, Australian Rugby may treat it a different. Brumbies ran over Moana Pacifica in the end, 24-0 to keep their... Again, this is that we sit there and we say it's about the Crusaders, and we've got to say it about the Brumbies. This is a Brumbies team that didn't pick up much talent, and yet they're sitting third in the ladder after losing the first three, so they've gone 6 on the trot. They are in some mighty form. It's going to be hard to stop them. They've probably got an easier run home, I would assume, than teams like... They've got the Hurricanes up next, so they're probably going to lose that.
They're hosting you, though. New Zealand, you still haven't won in Australia this year. Yeah. Hosting the Hurricanes, hosting Waratahs, travelling to Force, hosting the Reds, bye round, and then hosting the Crusaders. So they got 1 away game and 4 home games. Like, that's a great run back.
Great run home, yeah, exactly. And so they will be positioning themselves as a real opportunity for 1 or 2 spot with what the Chiefs, and the fact that they're playing the Crusaders as well. They'll be looking to lap that up, and rightfully so. They deserve that. And the final game, the Chiefs absolutely running away with it. They obviously took a stern feeling out of that Waratahs game and went back and said, we're going to fix this. So they did, and absolutely smashed the Highlanders 46-10. So, look, again, another week where we see those top 2 New Zealand sides, Chiefs and Crusaders, take to the top of the table. But then you've got from 3 to 6, those 4 Australian sides, this is exactly what Australian rugby wants and needs. They need teams making the playoffs. The fact that all 4 are very much putting themselves in that position is absolutely fantastic. But saying all this, no team eliminated yet from finals contention. Even the Jura can turn it around, as we've just seen. Moana Pacifica right there, only 6 points behind your Waratahs. It's going to be fascinating into the season as we roll into it, and all more important, as you said, to get those wins that you should be getting. Again, you look at your Waratahs getting a win over in Jura. Jura had only won 1 game up to that point, losing games. Moana Pacifica, Jura, the Highlanders have dropped off after their fast start, but they can still beat teams. They're going to break some teams' hearts. You can just tell the way it is going right now. You'll get to the end of the season, you'll play one of those teams needing a win, they'll beat you, and they will break your hearts. fascinating to come in. Again, don't count those Blues out yet as much as I would love to. They're 3-6, but they're only 4 points off you lot. They just lost to the Crusaders down in Crusaders country. They can do it against teams. Who have they got this week? The Reds. Better of the colours on this week in Queensland, which will be a big one to go forward. We've also got the Pacifica battle with Moana versus Jura. Again, Highlanders versus Crusaders in Highlanders country will be a good one. Chiefs versus Force. And then we take on our bogey team, the Brumbies, in Canberra, which probably means another loss, but fuck, who cares? So yeah, big weeks of Super Rugby.
Huge week.
A man who, will be doing the old Geordie Barrett move, Rieko Ioane, heading over to Leinster for a sabbatical next year. I think the shock of all of it, like everyone understood the Geordie Barrett one, like his family had ties, he'd done a bit of time in Ireland, I think, growing up with his dad or something like that. There was ties there. The Rieko Ioane one's a massive shock, not just for Rieko Ioane, as good of a player as he is, but for the whole situation that happened at the Rugby World Cup with Johnny Sexton and Rieko Ioane. The fact that he signed for Leinster must be just one of the biggest shocks in world rugby. Kind of out of the blue. Like, it's a very big twist that you didn't expect to see as a player of Rico's stature going over. Like, I understand a sabbatical and I totally get it, but the fact that he's gone to Leinster is just incredible. Like, the whole storytelling, the whole story of this. Again, Leinster can sign anyone, it seems like, out of their wazoo with the contracts that they have, ability they have with their Irish-based contracts. I think this is I think this is really, really good for Rieko Ioane. I think this will be a great step. Like, there's no doubt that I think Geordie Barrett's going to come back from the sabbatical as a better rugby player. I think it's great to get that experience in European football. Great to kind of learn under a new coach. I think Yarks Ninebar is there still coaching, so you get some of that South African fresh ideas and thinking. So I think that he'll come back a better rugby player. I think the same for Rieko Ioane. I think it's a great, great opportunity for him. It's also great for New Zealand rugby. We don't lose a player, but we're able to go over there and it builds that brand of New Zealand rugby. We look at Geordie Barrett, and if he puts performances like Geordie Barrett is doing, all that's doing is look how good Geordie Barrett is, this all black, rah, rah, rah. He's only there for 6 months this year, and then he comes back, and it's like just building that brand. So I'm all for these sabbaticals. Again, we've seen players like Nick White, we've seen Dave Poreke come back from playing overseas, and they did it in a longer period as better rugby players. And I think it's a great opportunity. I think more and more will see this sabbatical because of those rugby seasons happening. And I think it's a great opportunity for Rieko. It's just going to be interesting, the storytelling. Will he get booed like, that first game he comes on? Because it's not the same love affair of a Geordie Barrett where there's a lot more respect. Rieko speaks his mind as he does and as he should. And it's great drama and cinema for rugby, but it also could step on some of those Irish toes that are adamantly against what Rieko and happened to Johnny Sexton. So I'm going to wait and see how this happens and what happens, and I can't wait until kind of those first few games get underway so we all see kind of the building on. Again, if he performs well, I think it all goes smoothly. If he's playing poorly, it's all a whole different story. But I guess my question to you, what do you make of this sabbatical and any future sabbaticals down the line for a Wallabies player?
So he's going. So make sure I've got the details of this right. He's heading there next year, but then returning to the Blues in 2027, right?
Exactly the same as what Geordie's doing.
Yeah, so he's just a 1 year sabbatical, but I think the timing is also important. He's not missing the World Cup. He's back in New Zealand for the World Cup. He'll be 30 at that point. Still in good nick, presumably. Without injury and things like that. Look, there's a phrase that there's a saying from the coach of the NFL team I follow, Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He says you've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? So I think when you lose a player like Rieko Ioane, who is, an All Blacks stalwart, a Blues stalwart, right? It forces you to have to dig elsewhere for talent. Not that New Zealand needs any more talent, but it's like it makes you explore those other options. I think it's a look, it's a good thing for him in the short term. It might end up costing him an All Blacks spot down the line there because there's a lot of other players clambering up, that are looking for a shot there. It is good for the player though to go get that. It's one of the good things when you're a top level rugby player about being able to do is to go and play overseas, and to go to another country and be able to play in another country, and especially in that competition where you're not just in that country, you're traveling all around Europe, for it as well. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for him and his family as well. So it's sort of like a little bit like why not? Why not? Why would you not do this? Okay, you're 28, getting on a bit, you might, your All Black spot, you're away from the squad for a year, might be at risk. I don't know if he's got a family, but if you've got a young family, that can be, negative. Trying to uproot them, take it to another country, bring it back. There's different things, but really, you're going to get paid better. You're going to have different opportunities, learn different style of rugby. You're going to be seeing new places, and it's sort of like, when will this opportunity come back around again? Never. Once you're done playing rugby, you're done. There's no coming back. There's no unretiring, really. Not to the same level and things like that. It's sort of like, you're never going to get this opportunity again. May as well take it, right? You've put in great service to the Blues. You put in great service to the All Blacks. I hate the phrase you don't owe them anything. Of course you owe them something, but I think the way it's been done, it's not been like a, rug pull. It's not been like, oh, I don't want to play here anymore. He said, I'm going away from you and I'm coming back. I'm not, I still, care about the Blues, still care about the All Blacks, coming back. Yeah, I don't, I think it's one of these things, you have to allow the players the opportunity to do it. Now, look, I might feel differently if Joseph Suaalii takes a year off, right? And I understand that. I understand one of your best players, your best player, you see him take a year off somewhere, you're a bit like, fuck, I don't want, it's good for him, but man, I wish he was staying here. It's tough. It's tough to be a fan of a team and that you see that your player that you like doesn't want to be there. But again, I don't think that's the case here. He's going away for a year, so I think everyone will be all right. I've seen a few articles where they're like, "Oh, head scratching move," or "Why does it make sense?" or why it's not a win-win, or New Zealand rugby needs to stop Ireland from poaching players and shit like that. It's just settle down. Settle down.
Agreed, yeah. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think Joseph Suaalii would be probably an outlier for you lot, especially because of the marketing that he does bring in. But I think someone like a Taniela Tupou probably could benefit from a sabbatical year, again, very different culture, but again, opportunity to go over, learn from a different scrum coach, hear a different voice, all of those things on the other side of the world could be good for someone like that. Last point, the more and more I'm looking into this and the more I'm thinking, and we're seeing these sabbaticals happen and seeing Jordan Barrett playing in Leinster, and the fact that I'm based over here, a Club World Challenge just to me sounds right. What I'd love is, again, a tournament, and it could be like a 3-week tournament is the way I see it, because you take 2 best teams in the URC, 2 best teams in the Premiership, 2 best teams in French Rugby, 2 best teams in Super Rugby. For now, this is just what I'm thinking. You bring them in 3 weeks, you just go quarterfinal, semi-final, final. That's how you do it. So quarterfinal, again, you randomly draw it out. They can't be drawn against each other. They all end up on the other sides of each other, so that eventually it could be a French versus French final. But I just think I would love to see Crusaders versus Toulouse, or let's say the Waratahs were to finish in the top 2, never going to happen, but Waratahs versus Leinster, or Waratahs versus Saracens, something along those lines. The more and more, and I know, Saudi money, Qatar money, they're wanting to throw money at walls, that you could easily set something like this up. Now, I don't know how it works in the calendar. I don't know how it works in players' welfare, all of these things, but a one-off, 3-week tournament to get teams together, and again, quarterfinal, semi-final, final, that's all it is, straight knockout. You win or go home. I just think could be fascinating for the game of rugby, and a great build on what the products all these clubs are building at the moment.
I think it's another incentive for players as well. If you're trying to lure more players over from rugby league, say this is from Australian perspective, say you're trying to lure more players over from rugby league, hey, we've got this tournament that's coming as well. Like British and Irish Lions is a big draw, but World Cup is a big draw. But also, hey, want to go to the south of France? Let's go to the south of France. Want to go to Ireland? Want to go to England? We're going over there. Like we could go over there. We have this opportunity. Like again, that's one of rugby union's unique selling points over games like league is that it is a truly international game. So take advantage of it. Yeah, we need to be more international, more interconnected as a sport. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I just think the more and more I think about it, I'd love to see. Again, we see it in the European Rugby Championship, but ideally, I just want it to continue to grow. I think it's just the idea of a Crusaders. Like I know they played like Bristol, or the Reds played Bristol, and you'd have to work out how calendars make it work, and I totally understand that and where it actually makes sense. But I think there's a financial opportunity. French rugby would love to see the Crusaders play against like Toulouse or so on and so forth. So I think there's a way if you can do it, you can do it. But yeah.
Blues against Leinster, you get the Blues playing against Rieko Ioane,
Ioane, exactly. And I remember like the All Blacks versus Munster games are very well known because of just the history between All Blacks players playing for those teams. So yeah, I just sit there. I was like, there's an opportunity for this. I'm sure they're thinking about it. I'm sure it'll come down the pipeline. But I would be heavily invested in seeing teams like that go at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, again, as we said, another big week of Super Rugby coming up. Look, every week gets us closer to British and Irish Lions, gets us closer to international rugby, which is obviously the stalwart of our game. And players are starting to put their hands up, as we've just talked about. James O'Connor, another great week for him to put his name up in the bright lights and potentially make one of the comebacks that you didn't ever think you'd see, but there he is. But for now, I've been Luke. That has been Husey. We'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.
Peace.